Walden Bello, please join us here.
Walden is here.
Oh, you're there already. Okay.
Mendoza
Dr.
is
Mendoza.
not here.
Dr. Kalimbahan. All right. Thank you very much for that round of warm applause. As our speakers animatedly pointed out, there are challenges that we face. Dr. Mendoza started out by talking about the political dynasties. And we've had dynasties since forever, I think, and they're getting fatter and fatter as we move down the line. Dr. Bello talked about the things that we should be watching out for. And he started out by giving the reason why he left Congress, because the Daang Matuwid was not matuwid and was a little baku-bako. He talked about inequity, that, for example, the CARP law has not been able to address. Dr. Kalimbahan talked about the kinds of movements that they are now trying to institute among young groups of people like yourselves, trying to raise awareness about what to look for in leaders, about corruption, about the issues that we now face. And Winnie pointed out, zeroed in on corruption as a main issue that many of our speakers referred to as having translated political power into economic power, and therefore which affects all of us in a very real sense. So today we'd like to start out by asking, if we were to focus on just one single issue that we should think about for the coming elections, what would that be? Dr. Mendoza, you want to start? You have a microphone down there. Oh, you have it already.
So I'm an economist, so I can't really focus on one issue. That's my problem. But I do agree that as a clarion call for 2016, maybe good governance and anti-corruption would be the best sort of basket that you can frame it. But if I may, one of my, I guess my critiques of Matuwid na Daan is that some people thought that the absence of corruption alone will do the job. That is not going to do the job. In fact, if you appoint less than competent people, you will not get the MRT running. If you appoint people who are not making money or not getting kickbacks but are in no way the best people for that job, you'll get public services basically not satisfying the people, right? And you'll not get things running. So I think that was part of, and this is just, I'm reiterating the views of other speakers here. Part of the challenge is to grow the advocacy beyond just Matuwid na Daan. It has to go somewhere, and it has to convince our young people that that's worth going to.
Okay. But before we get into specific issues, like you're now saying, Dr. Mendoza, that it has to go beyond the single issue of corruption, that we must address as voters in 12 months. May I posit a question first to all four of you? Do you think that all of us here are now into the idea of voting on the basis of issues? Can I ask all of you to please just raise your hands? Do you think in your heart of hearts that you will vote on the basis of an issue? Raise your hand. Issues. That you will choose the president based on a specific set of issues. Not too many, I have to say. How many will vote on the basis of the traditional way, how you know the person, the stories, the backstories behind that person, the kind of personality he projects to the public? Very few brave people will admit that that's how they vote. But do you agree with the public here, Dr. Bello, that we're not into issues? Not everybody raised their hands on that.
Well, unfortunately, I think the major part of the electorate is still not on issues, but on clientelistic patronage kind of politics. However, I do think it is an uphill struggle. And I think this is a presidential campaign where with enough effort and with the cooperation of different segments of society and particular groups, we can push issues to the forefront and judge people by that, and to really grill them on issues like how they will eliminate or reduce corruption, how they will reduce inequality and poverty, what is their position on agrarian reform, what they would do with the energy policy of this country as well as with ecology. So I think that like Winnie, I would say let us not give up hope, because I do think that over time we can get a critical part of the community to really begin and to vote on issues.
Okay. Dr. Cleo, it's very interesting that you started your talk by saying that you were invited because the presidentiables could not make it. I didn't even know they were invited. But having said that, they don't appear, they don't come. Is that a clear sign to you that they're not willing to deal with issues?
Well, I'm sure I'm not sure exactly if it's because they're not willing to deal with issues, but perhaps to go back to your original question, I would say part of the reason why we still remain stuck in personality politics is because we don't have political parties that are genuine, as was mentioned in one of the slides. When you don't have genuine political parties, then you really end up having rhetoric about the person rather than about programs that political party will be pushing for once they are in power. So I think that is part of the problem. Having said that, I'm also, I think for the longest time, people have, during campaigns, they would pretty much focus on saying, I'm the one who's not corrupt, he's the one who's corrupt. But the front runner for the 2016, once upon a time, was a reformist during his younger years. People are worried now that he doesn't talk about governance and good governance. But at one point, he actually packaged himself as a reformist. So I think part of the problem is the fact that structurally and institutionally, you don't have genuine political parties.
Okay. Winnie, you were saying that was a very startling statistic that you put there, the per capita growth at 1.3 or 1.5, 1.58%. And for 49 years. Yeah, in the span of 49 years. And you attributed that to corruption.
Well, not entirely to corruption, obviously, but certainly a major factor was government and institutions. And part of that institutions is corruption. That's an ADB study, and it was a study by Jeffrey Sachs, etc. I mean, there's no denying it. And the reason I brought that in is because who puts the people in government? Is it not us? So if we don't realize that what's going to happen is if we vote for the wrong person, we're going to have 6 years of nothingness. Well,
but does that also mean that because we are responsible for the leaders that we put into office,
you want the best.
and there's a lot of talk about corruption. Everybody's talking about corruption. Everybody's using it as a hashtag. But is that going to affect our vote, do you think?
Well,
Look at the numbers.
I certainly hope so. Napaka-bobo naman natin if we're going to vote for somebody who is corrupt, who is so obviously corrupt, and put him in a leadership position.
But if you're saying we're bobo,
I know.
because we do that, haven't we proven that we are bobo because of the leaders that we have put in office in the past?
Bobo before. Now we're looking forward to a new election. We may not be so bobo anymore.
Okay. So to all the bobos and the bobas, which include all of us, we now turn it over to you on the floor. If you have questions, please feel free to stand up, pick up a mic, and posit your questions to our panel.
Just one thing.
Yes.
I'm a member of the Movement for Good Governance. It's, people all over the place, members, even Rappler, I hope. Well, you know, we have a scorecard, which is part of our voters' education. And there are only 3 questions. Ito ba ay mahusay? Ito ba ay nag-empower ng people? I don't know what is the Tagalog version of that. You know, is this man good? In other words, is he competent? Programs, etc. Does he empower the people? Does he get their opinions? Does he consult them, etc.? And the third is integrity. Does he have integrity? Corruption has to do with integrity. There are the 2 others. But boy, without that corruption, we're sunk because all our money is wasted. Could be brought to so many things. That's all I want. That's why I focus on corruption, because I think naman, you know, Bina is competent. Oh, you don't, he doesn't believe. You know, Dr. Mendoza doesn't say anything, but he does not think that Bina is competent. Well, I think he's competent. I mean, you know, he's not as competent as he says he is, but he certainly, of course, he's from UP.
Winnie, I think we have to be fair. Huh?
No.
We have to be
There
fair.
is. But what I'm saying, he's too, he's too arrogant, because he says he made Makati. That's not true. Makati made him rich, right? Lee Kuan
Okay.
Yew
I
made
think-
Singapore rich.
Mrs.
Makati
Monsod,
made-
Professor Monsod, I think one of the rules of the game is we're not going to campaign here.
I'm not campaigning. I'm merely
You're-
saying people should know these things, because that, right? So that it gets inside their head.
Okay?
I'm not campaigning. I don't have a party.
But you have a preference.
I have an advocacy against corrupt people in government.
Okay. I think we are all agreed to a man that we don't support corruption. Is that a correct assumption? Man or woman? Well, I'm using man as a generic term because there are many women who... I'm using it as a generic term because man and woman, most women are also... I think I'm getting myself into a trap here. I better stop while I'm not quite ahead. All right, Dr. Mendoza, let's hear from you. You were saying earlier that these dynasties existed or have been existing and are growing fatter. But I seem to feel that based on the latest SWS and Pulse surveys, the leading candidate, in this case, Mr. Binay, Vice President Binay, the issue of corruption and the talk about corruption has been whirling around us for several months now, if not years. It doesn't seem to affect him. It doesn't seem to affect his numbers. Can you tell us why?
Well, I don't know about that, whether I can tell you exactly why, but I think one of the challenges is that we are basically like-minded. This entire room is like-minded. We hate corruption. We want someone who is more ambitious next year. We have shared ideas on the type of leadership that we expect. But the real problem is out there. And the real problem was the last picture that I showed you. This is a line of people asking for basically money from someone who just won office. Part of, I think, the challenge behind this, the reason why there are such realities in our country right now is the lack of inclusive growth in the country, the fact that jobs are not that abundant. So we are stuck in a trap where we keep on sending corrupt, less ambitious people who do not want to push the right reforms, who then are feeding with all of these largesse that they get from corruption or from other things, the people who continue to send them back in there. And then, basically, there's this group that is trapped in the middle, and your only choice is to either stay here and duke it out or go abroad and actually work abroad. So I think the real challenge for our group is really how to break from this trap. How do you change the rules of the game so that people sort of, try to ambition for more or really just don't line up in that way?
Do any of our panel members have ideas of how to break out of that vicious cycle? That this will happen every time we have an election. People are going to expect that largesse. People are going to look to their leaders as supplying them with their food money, because that is how we have been conditioned in every election. Any ideas from our panel how to break the cycle? Winnie.
Well, you know, we have institutions that we have to strengthen. For example, the institution that we most, ignore is the institution called the barangay. That is the institution which has the most, democratic situation, because the people in the barangay are legislators. They can ask of their chairman what has been done to their barangay. They can recommend to the chairman what must be done to their barangay. And yet, up to this point, if I ask all the people in this room, how many of you have attended a barangay assembly? Look, 3, 4, 5, 6. Amazing. Barangay assembly, it's held twice a year, in March and in October. You hold that barangay chairman to account, and you can tell him what he should spend the money on, because the barangays get money like mad. And that is the start, because, if there is no corruption with that chairman, kind of hard to get corrupt to the mayor, no? Because it's a self-feeding institution. So there's so many things we can do, but we are caught in this morass of helplessness na hindi pwede kasi, it's been there since time immemorial. That's why I said, is it hopeless? No, it's not. But we got to work. It's just that we're lazy. We don't want to, barangay Saturday, that is a Saturday. I have to go to Boracay. Isn't that the case? I mean, if we want something hard enough, we will work hard enough. And unless we work hard enough, we're not going to affect any change in this country. Nobody gets a free lunch here.
But isn't it also because the people are very concerned about surviving? You have to get your meal. You have to clothe your children.
Kaya nga sinasabi natin kung ano ang epekto ng corruption eh. Sila ang naaapektuhan pinakamalaki.
Okay. Is it because we don't understand? We don't understand the connection?
Well, I think we should repeat it and repeat it, because what we're doing now is talking about corruption. It's become like a motherhood statement. But if you say what the effects of corruption are, health, infant mortality, etc., and then they'll start worrying about it. You have to bring the topic to their consciousness in the sense that they know how it's going to affect them. It's not just a word that sounds nice.
Yes. Dr. Cleo, in your Transparency International sessions that you have with young people, do you see changes in their perception about corruption and their performance and their relationship to the voting process?
Definitely. I mean, some of the participants in that particular youth program that we had were former SKs. And they were bribed. And they could not... Yes. So they would tell us their experiences. And it's really... it's very moving how they stood their ground and actually said no. They were very young at that time. So I really think the young people are the key, because social media is there. Public shaming is less. You're more adept with the technology, but also public shaming is fine by you guys through social media. We have a hard time calling out, for instance, a corrupt politician, but young people didn't have a hard time posting through social media the lifestyle of a son of a politician. I said, wow, great, I love it that young people are doing this. The vigilance is there, the public shaming is there. You're holding the father accountable through the son because he's posting a very, very excessive lifestyle.
Okay. Dr. Mendoza, you spoke about groups, right? Harnessing the power of groups. Can you tell us more about swing votes, and what difference this coming election will make if people band together to make a difference?
Well, let me posit a few ideas. One is that Visayas and Mindanao have never been the emphasis of foreign direct investments in the country. Most of it is concentrated in Luzon. This is part of the lack of inclusiveness of our growth pattern. Sec RC mentioned that 60% of our GDP is accounted for by 3 provinces in Luzon. So, if you are born in Visayas and Mindanao, something is horribly wrong with your future. You must band together and actually exert political pressure on what needs to happen so that more investments go into your region. That's one potential block vote, and I think some of the party list groups are already organizing along these lines, at least the decent ones. Another, yes, because there are also some dynastic influences in some of the party list groups. The other potential block vote is really the religious vote. And we hate corruption. We talk about trying not to have corruption in our lives. We had the Pope visit us. He said to us to try and kick out all the corrupt people in our government, and yet we keep on voting for them. So this is the inconsistency with our faith. And I think that is a real question that some of our church leaders need to address. That could have been a potentially strong block vote. Anyone corrupt, don't vote for that person. Already violated several things, right? And the last group that I hope this particular group will also try to explore is the youth vote. I think the youth is dispersed. You are not tapped by any of the political parties with the exception of a few who are actively recruiting young leaders from your group. But you can actually engage and organize. And I hope that the future of the country will include such an organization of a block vote from the youth who will look for more ambitious economic policies.
Isn't it difficult to organize Filipinos because we tend to be regionalistic? You know, we have little clubs according to the language we speak, according to the way we like to dress, according to our to schools. Yes, well, right in this room, right? There's the greens and the blues and the maroons. The maroons are out of it because they're not with it. Maybe that's it. Isn't it difficult to organize a block vote?
It is, and it's difficult in any country. I think there will always be some kind of friction across different groups. But I think that the things that bind us together as a country, these are the things that many of these corrupt politicians who want to tear up. Inclusive growth, they will not support this. The ambition for generating enough investments and jobs for the country, they have not reflected this ambition. They thrive in our lack of unity. They like it that we are so angry at what happened in Mamasapano. They're actually thriving in that environment. Some of them are using this to their advantage. So I think that's the messaging that needs to be taken over by something that is more unifying. Who is that person that will unify our country?
Well, then you wanted to say something, or can I ask you about, for example, Akbaya and your party? Are they organizing groups to harness the power of your constituency?
I hope so. Let me just make a few points before I answer that. One is, I think what Dr. Mendoza said, I would just like to take off on that, because I think what a number of our elites have managed to do is to co-opt the rhetoric of reform, of sustainable development. They say all the right things, and during debates, it's a very easy thing for them to come out with, especially some of the more intelligent ones. Like, for instance, this fellow called Cayetano. Okay, I don't know if he's from LaSalle, but probably not. But in any event, the second thing I think is that I think it's very real, because most of the people in our country are really poor, in the margins of starvation and struggling. Okay, and let us not underestimate the appeal of somebody like the one we don't want to name, okay, who basically says that, okay, I'm all of these things, but I can offer you a cake on your birthday, and I can offer you great burial expenses. And the thing is that those things, I think, for people who are struggling, matter in terms of the appeal. So there is this kind of, I hate to use the word, paternalistic socialism, of which Makati is supposed to be the symbol, that is being pushed throughout the country. And I think we must not underestimate that appeal. The third thing I would just like to say is to come back to what Mr. Mendoza said and to what Winian and Dr. Cleo had said is, hindi maaring corruption lang or good governance. Dapat talaga nakatali rin sa social reform and economic reform. And I think we will not get very far with just good governance if land reform is not being implemented, okay, because it is one of the solutions to poverty, or if we don't have a major overhaul of our economic policies so that we reindustrialize the country and we move away from policies that have destabilized agriculture. And we move away from a policy that makes the principal aim of political economy for so many years the payment of the foreign debt. No? Kasi resources matter. And unless there are these resources policies that advocate good governance are not going to go very far. Kaya I think these are all interrelated. Finally, on institutions that Winnie and Dr. Cleo said, I think that political parties matter. And this is why I really think, that although the party list system might have had its deficiencies, nevertheless, it was a good break. And that the important thing is to reform it so that we, in fact, move away from the kind of traditionalistic political parties and have real party lists. So I would just like to say that that really matters a lot. Coming back to the question of my party, okay, my party. Yes, I think it has been trying its best to recruit and to push strategies of reform. But let's just put something here out in the open, which is that if you're in a coalition, there are times when there is always a balance between interests and values. And there comes a time when values must take precedence. And people must ask ourselves, is it worth it remaining in this coalition? Or is it a violation of our principles? The party leadership answered one way, I answered the other way, and let's leave it at that.
Okay, well said. As we talk about the issues that are now facing us in the elections next year, we move on to the next question. What kind of leaders will fill the bill of what this panel is now saying? That we must go beyond just corruption, which we all agree on, and we must go into specific programs like the distribution of land, like the effects of corruption on the very poor. And in the hope that we get out of that last picture, which was of voters lining up to get their pabuya, not pabuya, but balato, to get their balato at the end of the election. Are there any other comments from the floor? Yes, please. Yes. Please just pick up a microphone, or would you like to just shout it out?
Over here or over there? And let's get our next person asking a question over here.
Yes. I think we have room for about 3 questions, and then we can close this panel and move on to the next question, which is, what kind of leaders will fulfill all of these challenges that our panel have just presented? Yes, please, your question. Please identify yourself and posit your question.
Good afternoon. I'm Jared Ansaldo from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and I'm from Buklod UPLB, a political organization in UPLB. So I would like to ask this question na kasi yung hindi na-tackle sa inyong mga speeches is the situation on education, which is also a key sector on the youth. Kasi alam po natin yung education ay isang mahalagang tool lalo na sa mga kabataan na matuto sa kanilang future. So I would like to ask the panel, what is your take on education and how does it affect the votes for 2016? So yun lamang po.
Okay, any comments on education? What's the challenge for education and how should it be addressed? Anyone? Dr. Mendoza, yes.
Well, I have some good news and bad news. Let me start with the bad news. We have this massive data set on political dynasties in the Philippines, and we wanted to find out, this is linked to your question, whether more education leads to less dynasties, right? Of course, long story short, with all the econometric sort of magic that we do as economists, we found very little link between education outcomes and political dynasties. You can have political dynasties in places with lots of education or strong educational investment. That's one. Of course, we didn't try more sophisticated measures of education like quality. Quality of education is very poorly measured right now in our country. And of course, we all know quality matters, right? Especially here in La Salle, Ateneo, UP, right? It does matter, and it's part of the inequality that we're seeing. Some firms only want to hire from these particular schools, right? This is part of the thing that we need to change. It's bad that they do this. It be more inclusive. The good part, actually, on education is that this administration, if you want to give it some credit, has made a major push on education reform. Not all of it, so I see your brows are furrowing a bit. So I'm sure that it has not satisfied all of the wishes of the youth sector. But let me give you a few examples. K-12 is an important reform. It costs us more, but guess what? That's the needed quality that we need, and in order for international standards to be satisfied. The second part is actually this thing about the dropout rate. And our Pamilyang Pantawid program has been adjusted in order to lower the dropout rate of young people who are trying to get a high school degree. And based on the research, and this is coming out of the UP School of Economics, that's really the breakaway point for poverty. Having a high school degree at least gives you a fighting chance not to be poor, and your family a fighting chance to break free from the poverty trap. So at least on those two things, I think there are some good things happening.
Well, if you think there seems to be the idea that the poor don't have as much intelligence as we do in order for voting. I think that's wrong. But, assuming that that is right, 68% of our poor families are families whose household heads have no more than a 6th grade education. That's how important education is in trying to beat whatever it is for governance, etc. It's very important. And that's just quantity, huh? We're not even talking about quality. 68% of the poor in the Philippines families have household heads who are no more than 6th grade. God.
Sad statistic.
No, but it's very important to show that once you get education, you have a more than even chance of breaking out of poverty.
Okay. Yes, Walden.
Well, I think in line with that, one of the positive things, because I'm not all critical of the current administration, has been the provision in the conditional cash transfer program that says, that in order to be able to receive the cash transfers, the kids must be kept in school and that basically this.
85% of the time.
Sorry.
85%
Percent
of the time.
yes. And that I think that research has in fact shown that this is one of the elements of that program that is in fact most positive. And hopefully the next administration would in fact expand that and seriously push it.
Okay.
Yeah, but the problem is today. And the problem is who are we going to vote for next year?
That's our problem.
This is an intergenerational thing. We have problems today.
Yes, that will transfer to the next generation. Are you okay on that question?
Okay na po.
Thank you. Next.
A pleasant afternoon. I'm Reggie Yamada Barakit from De La Salle University, co-founder of United Social Entrepreneurship Conference. 2016 is not only an election year. 2016 is 30 years after the revolution that restored our democracy. My question is, has that revolution failed us, and do we need yet another revolution? But please don't make a mistake of having bloodshed or what. A revolution on concept of drastically transform our country for the better. Thank you.
Do we need another EDSA? Gentleman first.
Yes. Let me just say that, as I mentioned earlier, one of the greatest challenges is in fact saving democracy in this country, because the fact that it has not really delivered in terms of what the majority want, which is less poverty and more equality, has in fact created a situation whereby there are more and more of the young that do not remember the martial law years, that have a sort of romanticized image of it, which is propagated very cleverly through the internet. And where there is the idea that somehow a new man or woman on horseback might be the solution to what the old dictator called the democratic stalemate. So I think this is really key. Now, when I looked at the experience of liberal democracies that overthrew dictatorships back in the 1980s, what worries me is that most of them have had the same experience as the Philippines. Okay? Whether you look at Brazil or a number of other countries, what we've had is elites basically restoring oligarchies, having great competition, great elections, but more inequality and even more poverty. And so I think the challenge for the Philippines and other countries is how do we move away from this stagnant liberal democracy to a more participatory kind, that will really be able to equip people to take on and tackle and manage issues with the appropriate consequences in terms of social justice. And I think that we have no time to lose in this. And as I said earlier, there might be, I'm worried that 2016 might be, was one of the last chances we might have to prove that, in fact, democracy works.
Okay, Cleo, did our EDSA revolution fail?
I wouldn't want to say whether it failed or not, but personally, when I think about the EDSA revolution, sometimes I wish we didn't have a sense that political change is something like that. Because democracy is a painful process of procedures. And for as long as we don't roll up our sleeves and become part of those procedures as citizens, then we'll always think that precisely it's instantaneous political change. It's not. We need to participate in that change.
You're saying we have not participated.
Yeah. We could do more. We really
So
could
it has
do
failed.
more.
That's what you're saying. It has failed.
We could have improved better.
No, you know what? What happened is we won, right? And then we let go. Kasi tapos na. Hindi na tayo nagtrabaho pagkatapos noon. That is absolute, that is a recipe for failure, really. In other words, it is not the EDSA revolution that failed. It is we who failed EDSA because we did not start to monitor our leaders, voting for them, and that's the end. And then, wait for another 3 years and then vote again. No, you vote for them and then you breathe down their necks and say, hoy, mali ka, or hoy, tama ka. Hindi ba? That's what we lack. I think it is a lack of maturity of our people, or it is a habit of yung last 2 minutes that is very difficult to break, but we have to break that.
You don't think it's poverty that forces us to be not indifferent, but so focused on getting that meal for the day that
what?
we don't concern ourselves because we think the government's going to do that anyway.
No, I don't. I don't think poverty is the cause of everything of our poor elections, etc. That's not true. All the while, all our elections, our presidents never got re-elected except Marcos. They had the money, they had the goons, they had the guns, and they still couldn't get re-elected. And who was the one? Who were the people voting? The poor. Oh, the rich are only 5% of the population. So, all they need is information. All they need is information, and that's where we have to help in educating them. They don't have the information. They get the information from this media.
Including yourself?
you know what I mean? Yung constant haranguing. I hear those radio programs and constantly haranguing, and sometimes they are so off base. And yet that's what the people hear all the time, and no one bothers to call them up and say, hoy, I happen to know that your statement is not true. Nobody. The rich, they say, another. But constantly you're telling that to the people, and they start believing it. That's what's happening to Mama Sapano.
Okay. Did I answer your question? Do we need another revolution?
No, of course not.
No, of course not, is the answer.
I just want to interject. Tweet na daan, yes, maybe it might succeed. But the problem is, saan nga ba pupunta yung tweet na daan? We don't have a vision. That's why, in the next election, we need to elect a leader who has a vision. A vision on 2050 or 2100. Because my concern is, 30 years ago, these are the problems. Maybe 30 years from now, is this the same problems that we are going to face? And I don't want that by that time, that if I'm candidate, these are the issues that I will be facing. Thank you.
Okay, we'll vote for you when you run. Okay, one last question. Are we okay,
No,
Pat?
I think from popular demand, we can answer quite a lot of questions, but we would like to ask everyone to just ask one question, and two, if just one member of the panel can answer. So
Okay.
let's have our, who came first of the two gentlemen?
Is that the line? Oh my gosh.
Oh, not just that. We have a line over here too.
Oh my. Let's make it quick.
Okay,
Not more than 10 words. Yes?
please give a chance to senior citizen.
Senior citizen discount. Okay. 15 words.
Okay, I am from Mindanao. I am a general, retired. We have so many problems in the Philippines, namely poverty, injustice, disease, drugs, CPP, NPA, Mindanao problems, and so many problems. What we need, a leader who has the character, who has the temperament, he has the determination and political will to solve all these problems. Now, question. As Ms. Monsoda said, he mentioned people has integrity, competence, and empowerment. Maybe we can get some Filipinos to have those qualifications. But the problem is they are not known. Hindi sila kilala. How can you win an election when people are buying the votes of the Filipino people? How? That is my question. Thank you.
Okay, one answer from the panel in 10 words or less.
I just want to thank you for pointing out that that is one of the big problems. If campaign finance is not controlled, if the law is not enforced, that will be a problem. If only the top 5 or 10% can afford to run for public office in the Philippines, think about the selection and also the payback that has to happen after.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please. This side.
Hi, I'm Eunice Hernandez from De La Salle University, and I would just like to ask, what will validate that the presidential candidates have the qualities that the people are looking for in a leader?
What will validate?
Their,
Winnie.
their performance. I mean, that's exactly what they're there when they're there leading. You monitor their performance. If they didn't perform well, don't vote for them. That's the monitoring that's hard. And what we tend to do is we tend to leave the monitoring to somebody else because we're too busy doing something else.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick. I'm from the LSU. I'm also an intern in the U.S. ASEAN Business Council. My question is, in the absence of a strong party system, patronage has long been the only way for people in our government to make meaningful strides or to get things done in general. Do you believe that given this entrenched patronage culture in our government, that we will truly be able to see a truly reformist president in this election?
Okay, answer. Anybody?
I
Winnie.
don't know who the candidates are, except one. Right? And I'm not in favor of that one, but I'm certainly, I'd certainly like to see who's going to come out before I make a statement. Yes. Thank you. You are the general's wife, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you very
who
much.
suffered?
He does not,
Who suffered?
he did
Who
not,
suffered
he
so
did not
much?
introduce himself properly.
Yeah, because he is like that. That's why in our partnership, I am the bonga, he gives the buga. Because he really gives.
Good for you. See,
You
behind
know?
every successful general is a surprise
I
wife.
am inviting everybody. I am inviting everybody to attend our convention. You may call it convention at 32nd District, the Summary Street near GMA, because we are having a convention for non-traditional politicians. We are producing already, inviting people to come. Kung wala silang pera, yung grupo magre-raise. Yan, ang
Ayan,
aming.
now
Can
that's
you help
action.
us raise funds?
I will certainly do that.
Yeah.
I
will invite you.
Let's publicize it. Yes.
Yeah, I will invite you. Remember, May 16, that is, anong day yun? Yan, we have invitation here. We have invitation
All right.
already.
This
We
is-
already conducted, analyzed the situation.
Bah.
Tapos, naglagay na kami ng mga criteria. And part of
Aba,
that
good
is
for
yun.
you.
Meron na kaming palatuntunan sa kanila.
Oh, good.
My husband is very meek, hindi umiimik.
Oo.
That's why I have to do that.
A round of applause.
Thank
ladies
you.
and
Thank you
gentlemen.
very much.
I'll
Mabuhay
show
po
them.
kayo.
I'll show
Ayan,
them.
that is people power exercising. That's great.
Okay, next question, please. From which side? This side here?
This side.
Yes.
First of all, Assalamualaikum. Greetings of peace. I am Jamil Faisaladyong of University of San Carlos and President of the Federation of Muslim Students Associations in Cebu. I would just like to ask, do you believe that peace advocacy, aside from the passage of the Bangsamoro Basic Law, do you believe that peace advocacy should also be one of the presidential candidates' primary concern? Thank you.
The BBL. Walden?
Yes, I think definitely peace advocacy, bringing about peace, not only with the MILF, but with other insurgent groups in the country. I think that is very important. But again, the point that I would like to make at this, given this chance, is that we must absolutely, pass the BBL, because the alternative to the BBL not passing is so many more years of war in Mindanao. And we must not be misled by politicians who are riding on very retrograde feelings to try to torpedo this, mainly in order to be able to project themselves, in fact, as presidential candidates. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Yes, questions from this side, please.
Good afternoon. I am Jeffrey Brazaldo from the Ateneo. I have a question. We've talked about the challenges we face today, and I'd like to ask about a solution. Do you think that the Freedom of Information Bill will provide solutions to our issues of corruption, agrarian reform, with its promotion of transparency and accountability?
Absolutely, yes, because that will give us, especially with respect to this statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth, it's like pulling teeth, and that's a public document. We should be able to get that, and we can tell immediately whether this guy has been fooling around on his wealth or not.
Yes, Walden, quick answer.
I would just like to add to this that endanger yung FOI, no? I mean, Malacanang really doesn't support it, and members of Congress are in fact, not very much for it. So we really have to make sure that people power makes the difference in this case, no? Kasi pag hindi napasa ito within the next 2 to 3 months, no? Going into September, October, wala na. Kasi for all intents and purposes, Congress ends work by around December. After that, it's all elections.
Okay, note that. The FOI, we have to do something about it. Yes, next question, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Gabe Onkiko from Calayan College. I'm also a member of the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines. And I noticed that the nucleus of this panel certainly is reforms. We didn't really touch on the continuation of reforms, because certainly the reforms that are already in place, and we are in this vicious cycle, as you put it, because we aren't following through with a lot of these things, certainly after EDSA, certainly after that. My question is then, what can we do, perhaps particularly for the youth sector and the education sector, with bolstering the continuation of present reforms? Thank you.
Cleo, would you like to answer that? Or Dr. Mendoza? You first, yes.
Well, in terms of pushing for reforms, really you're looking at an entire ecosystem. I mean, you are looking at a lot of very weak institutions. We've made a lot of strides, but as was pointed out, the Corruption Perceptions Index, for instance, was now 2014, the latest is 38 over 100. That's an improvement. But it's still a failing mark, right? So there's still a long way to go. Definitely you don't want to step back, but you want to step forward. And that's really, as I said, rolling up one's sleeves, making sure that you demand accountability, and that's hard given the many weak institutions that we have.
Okay, social media is a new element in reform, and that's how you can push it. And that's why we have this forum today. Yes, Dr. Mendoza.
Yes, if I can support Professor Bello's mentioning earlier that the FOI bill needs to be supported. In my mind, there are 3 remaining key laws that need to be passed. The first one is the Bangsamoro Basic Law, and it is a prime factor which could include Mindanao in the development trajectory of the country. The second one is the Freedom of Information Law, and it could solidify all of the transparency reforms that the government, the few transparency reforms that the government has managed to implement, including in the budget, including in customs, including in different agencies that already have some degree of transparency. The third one is the Competition Policy Bill, which I don't see many young people actually talking about. FOI is a little sexier than competition policy. But competition policy is extremely important because of the concentration of economic power in some of our industries at this point. Without an overall regulator that conducts the type of competition and competitiveness that this country will undergo, especially with ASEAN economic integration, then we're actually headed for a lot more trouble without that bill. So I think that's the third one.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question?
Our last question.
Last question.
From over there.
Yeah, my name is RV Vicera. I'm with a little project called Partnerships for Integrity and Jobs. What I want to do is just point out a little comment on an observation, because we probably are not very are putting much emphasis on educational demographics. I think there's one comment a while ago, but really, if you try to summarize the demographics of the country in terms of educational attainments, 80 to 85% of our population has never stepped into college or will never. And then we have 15 to 20% who have gotten into college. Half of that will probably graduate, and half of those who graduate are abroad. So that's the kind of thinking process, level of decision-making quality that we have. So if we talk about trying to demand accountability among our officials, there are only a few of us, really. And so with this in mind, I would like to think that the leader I want is one who will try to educate the masses of our people about the issues that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very well taken comment. I'd like to now close this session by asking our four speakers to zero in and pinpoint the one particular statement that you would like our audience to be left with based on our challenge today as a panel. What is the single most important challenge that faces us as we look forward to the elections in 2016? Ladies first.
Well, I mean, this is the fourth, fifth, sixth time I've said it. The single most important challenge is to get rid of corruption no matter what happens. Two, I mean, single most. Tama na yung single most. I mean, when you're talking about 20% or 5%, remember you're talking about 100 million people. So 20% of that's 20 million people. There's a lot of talent there. But of course, we have to make sure that that talent is known to everybody. That's our important role. But I just like to close with this. You know, we're snowed by the amount of the job that is facing us, and I want to put it down a little. You know, when you say you need a block of 3 million, a block of 6 million, parang, you know, hindi ka pa nag-uumpisa na namamatay ka na sa hirap. I just like to think of it this way. I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do. And with the grace of God, I will do it. That's all. Do what you can. Don't wait for a movement to coalesce, etc. Just do it.
Nike it. Cleo.
I guess to keep on asking that question, what kind of leader do I want? Not only to ask that question by yourself, but also to have that discussion with your peers and with your friends about it constantly, but also to be vigilant and to keep on thinking of creative ways to find solutions to our problems.
Walden?
I think I would pose the issue more, not so much as on what kind of leader do we want, but what kind of system do we want? And can the person-elect help bring us to a situation where this democracy no longer works just as a mechanism for elites to get into power, but to in fact bring about real change in terms of equity and good governance, that will really benefit most of the people. So I think what we really are looking at is making democracy deep and making democracy work, and who among the candidates will in fact become the instrument of this desire. My last point is to again say something I said earlier. People ask about a vision. yes, I think a vision is quite important, but you know, every election, people, candidates come up with their visions, and they've got great, great rhetoric, you know, that in fact co-opts some of the rhetoric of sustainable development and all that participatory democracy. So I would say, going back to what Winnie said, look at the past of these people, look at their records, and don't be fooled by words. Thank you.
Dr. Mendoza?
Yeah, I think the sad situation that we're in right now is that powerful people are deciding who we're going to be choosing from next year. And you can see that in the newspaper headlines of the last week. So if you ask me, we can either lower our expectations and ask these people what their vision is for all of us, or we can start a long-term movement or initiative where we're really going to look for the best and brightest in this country and put them in that position one day. So I rather like the young leader from LaSalle who spoke earlier, that he doesn't want to face these same challenges 30 years from now when he's running for senator or congressman. That is what my generation should try to take care of and put them in a better position when that person takes over. So I think that's what I would like to see happen, not just next year, but in the years to come. Thanks.
Thank you very much for all your comments. When Cleo spoke about what kind of leader am I looking for, as a observer myself, I began thinking, the first leader that I ever met was my mother, because as a child, you grew up in a home where she was leading the household. What kind of mother was she? What kind of leader was she? She was a leader that cared about my welfare. She was a leader that aimed to empower me so that when I grew up, I could fly with my own set of wings. And as far as I was concerned, she was the most competent. She could cook, she could write, she could drive, she could do all things I couldn't do. I think at the very heart of choosing a leader, I'd like to pay tribute to mothers whose Mother's Day just passed as the first leader that we ever met in our lives, and to think of them as somebody who can translate into a leader we want for a country. When leaders say, I'm the father of this country, or I'm the mother of this country, we want to say, don't use words to fool me, show it, just do it, Nike it. And on that note, I wish to thank you very much for listening to our first panel. Let's move on to the second and find out who is that leader that we want. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.